Nothing breaks a woman's heart quite like watching her husband's dreams slip through her fingers. Sarah Mitchell had promised him on his deathbed she'd keep the ranch. But now the bank notice in her hands made that promise feel like a cruel joke. The Wyoming Territory ranch that once filled their hearts with hope now drowned her in debt she could never repay. 30 days. That's all she had before losing everything. Then a stranger rides up to her gate. He's tall, well-dressed, with kind eyes and a black hat pulled low. His horse is fine, his clothes expensive, but his manner is gentle. He dismounts and walks to her porch with the confidence of a man who knows what he wants. His offer is simple. He'll pay every debt save her ranch and ask for only one thing in return: her hand in marriage. But can a grieving widow trust a man who seems too good to be true? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Mitchell ranch. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, staring at the foreclosure notice. The paper trembled in her hands. She'd been fighting this battle for 8 months, ever since Thomas passed, leaving her with nothing but memories and mounting bills. She twisted the thin gold band on her finger. Thomas's wedding ring. They'd married young, barely 20, full of dreams about building something lasting in this harsh but beautiful land. He'd promised her they'd make it work, that the ranch would provide for them and for the children they'd hoped to have. But the children never came, and now Thomas was gone. Mrs. Mitchell. The voice from the porch made her jump. She hadn't heard the horse approach. Through the window, she saw a man's silhouette against the morning light. Sarah rose slowly, smoothing her worn calico dress. She opened the door cautiously, keeping the screen latched. The man on her porch was unlike anyone she'd seen in these parts. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive-looking coat. His hat was black felt, not the practical leather most ranchers wore. His boots were polished to a shine, but it was his eyes that struck her. Deep brown, kind, with a patience that spoke of a man who'd learned to wait for what he wanted. "I'm Jonathan Wade, ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I heard about your situation. I was hoping we might talk." Sarah's hand tightened on the doorframe. Everyone in town knew about her situation. The banker, Mr. Cornelius, had made sure of that. Vultures, every one of them. "If you're here about buying the ranch, Mr. Wade, you've wasted a trip. This land isn't for sale." "No, ma'am, I'm not here to buy anything." His voice was steady. "But I am here to help if you'll let me." Something in his tone made her study his face more carefully. There was no pity there, no condescension, just genuine concern. Against her better judgment, she unlatched the screen door. "I suppose you'd better come in then." The kitchen seemed smaller with him in it. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair touched with silver at the temples. As she poured coffee, Sarah found herself sneaking glances at him. He had the bearing of a successful man. What was a man like this doing on her failing ranch? "Mrs. Mitchell," he began once they were seated, "I know this might sound presumptuous, but I've been asking around town about you." Sarah stiffened. "Oh, nothing improper, I assure you. I was just curious about your husband's ranch. About you." He paused. "I understand you're facing some financial difficulties." Heat rose in Sarah's cheeks. "I don't see how that's any concern of yours, Mr. Wade." "Perhaps it isn't," he admitted, "but I'd like it to be." The words hung in the air. "I'm not sure I understand." Jonathan leaned forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, Sarah, if I may, I'm a successful businessman. I've been blessed with considerable wealth, but I've been cursed with considerable loneliness." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. She knew where this was going, and it frightened her more than the foreclosure notice had. "I'm 42 years old," Jonathan continued. "I've never married. I've spent 20 years building an empire, but empires are cold comfort when you're eating dinner alone every night." "Mr. Wade, please let me finish. I came to Sweet Creek on business, but when I heard about you, I saw an opportunity that might benefit us both." Sarah stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked Thomas's grave. "You want to buy my ranch after all?" "No." The single word was quiet, but definitive. "I want to marry you." The silence stretched like a taut rope. "You don't even know me," she whispered. I know enough. Jonathan's voice was closer now. I know you're a woman of courage. I know you're loyal. I know you're proud. Sarah turned to face him, tears threatening. And what do you know about love, Mr. Wade? His expression grew sad. I know what it's like to want it. I know what it's like to have everything and still feel empty inside. So you thought you'd just buy yourself a wife? No, I thought I might offer a practical arrangement. You need financial security. I need companionship. We could start there and see what develops. Sarah sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. It was insane, impossible. But as she looked around her modest kitchen at the stack of unpaid bills, she couldn't deny the desperate appeal of his offer. What exactly are you proposing? I pay off all your debts. I provide funds to improve the ranch. In return, you become my wife. We live here together, and I help you run this place. And what do you expect from me as your wife? A flush crept up his neck. I expect nothing beyond your companionship. Anything else would have to develop naturally. I'm not asking you to love me, Sarah. I'm asking you to give us both a chance. Sarah stared at him. Part of her wanted to laugh. Part of her wanted to cry with relief. And part of her, the part drowning in loneliness, wanted to say yes before she could change her mind. I need time to think. Of course, he said, rising. I'm staying at the hotel. When you've made your decision, you can find me there. He paused at the door. Sarah, your husband would want you to be happy. Sometimes honoring the dead means choosing to keep living. After he left, she sat alone as the morning sun climbed higher. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was possibility. Strange, frightening, and utterly unexpected. 3 days passed. 3 days of sleepless nights, weighing impossible choices. Sarah walked into the Sweet Creek Hotel, her best blue dress rustling. Her hands trembled as she clutched a marriage contract in her reticule. Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor, looked up with barely concealed curiosity. Mrs. Mitchell, how can I help you? I'm looking for Mr. Wade. Room 12, dear. Shall I send word? Please. She waited in a worn velvet chair. When Jonathan descended the stairs, she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes that made her chest tighten. Mr. Wade, she rose. I've made my decision. He gestured to a quiet corner. I'll accept your proposal, she said. The relief that crossed his face was profound. I'm honored, Sarah. I truly am. I have conditions. Name them. I want to be buried next to Thomas. That ground must never be sold, and I want to keep running the ranch operations myself. You can advise, but the day-to-day decisions remain mine. Understood. And I want your word that if this doesn't work, you'll provide me with enough money to start over. I won't be left destitute again. Sarah, he said, his expression earnest, you'll never be destitute. Whether this marriage works or not, you have my word. She studied his face, searching for deception. She found only sincerity. Then I suppose we should make this official. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony in his chambers. It was brief, businesslike. A stark contrast to her first wedding, with its flowers and music and Thomas grinning like he'd won the lottery. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Jonathan leaned down and kissed her cheek. A chaste, respectful gesture that made the reality sink in. She was married again, to a stranger, for money. The ride back to the ranch, their ranch now, was quiet. About the sleeping arrangements, she said suddenly, her cheeks flaming. I'll take the spare room, he said gently. I saw it when I was here before. It'll suit me fine. Relief flooded through her. He pulled the buggy to a stop. Sarah, this arrangement moves at whatever pace feels right to you. I'm a patient man. That evening, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table like polite strangers. Jonathan had insisted on cooking. The meal was surprisingly good. Tell me about your business interests, she said. Cattle mostly, he replied. Some mining. Nothing too exciting. He asked about the ranch, about Thomas, about her struggles. He listened with a quiet intensity that made her feel, for the first time in a long time, truly heard. Why me, Jonathan? She asked finally. You could have any woman you want. He set down his fork. Because when I asked around town about you, everyone said the same thing. You were decent, hardworking, and loyal. And because when I saw you that first morning, standing on your porch with your chin up, I thought to myself, there's a woman worth knowing. Sarah felt something flutter in her chest. Not love, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of respect. And you, she asked, what should I know about you? His expression grew guarded. I'm a simple man. I work hard. I keep my word. I've made mistakes, but I try to learn from them. That's not really an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now, he said gently. We both have pasts, Sarah. Mine is more complicated, but I promise you this. Nothing in my past will bring harm to you or this ranch. She wanted to press him, but something in his eyes stopped her. Later that night, as she lay in the bed she'd shared with Thomas, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in her house, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Security. It wasn't love, but it was hope. And for now, that was enough. The first week felt like learning to dance with a partner whose steps you didn't know. Sarah and Jonathan moved around each other carefully, politely. True to his word, Jonathan rode into town and settled every debt. The look on the banker's face when he counted out the full amount in cash was worth the months of worry Sarah had endured. Word spread quickly. By afternoon, half the town seemed to have business that required them to ride past the ranch, hoping for a glimpse of the mysterious, wealthy husband. Jonathan seemed oblivious. He spent his days studying the ranch, walking the property lines, examining the fences, counting the cattle. He carried a small leather journal where he recorded his observations in neat, precise handwriting. Sarah found herself curious about that journal, though she was too proud to ask. The north pasture needs new fencing, he announced one morning, and the barn roof has loose boards. Sarah bristled. I know what needs fixing, Jonathan. I've been managing this place for months. I didn't mean to imply otherwise, he said unruffled. I was simply offering to arrange for the work to be done. I can arrange it myself. Of course you can, but why should you have to? It was a reasonable question, but it touched on something she wasn't ready to examine. Independence had been her lifeline. Surrendering it felt dangerous. He seemed to understand. What if we compromise, he suggested. You make the decisions. I'll provide the means. The arrangement worked better than she'd expected. Having the resources to pay fair wages for good work felt almost luxurious. Jonathan proved surprisingly useful. Despite his refined appearance, he knew his way around cattle. Sarah watched from the kitchen one morning as he helped repair the barn roof, his expensive coat discarded, his hands sure and capable. Your husband's quite a worker, the hired hand commented. Don't see many businessman types who ain't afraid to get their hands dirty. No, Sarah agreed, though she still knew very little about where he'd acquired such skills. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Sarah was struggling with a heifer tangled in old wire near the creek. Jonathan appeared beside her. Easy there, girl, he murmured to the animal, his voice low and soothing. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, untangling the wire while keeping the animal calm. Within minutes, the heifer was free. Where did you learn to do that? Sarah asked, impressed. My father's ranch in Texas, he said. His expression darkened. Sold it. After my father died, I had no reason to stay. There was pain in those words, old and carefully contained. Sarah recognized it because she carried similar wounds. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the barriers between them seemed to thin. It was a long time ago, but thank you. They walked back to the house together, and Sarah realized something had shifted. The formal politeness was softening into something more genuine. That night, she thought about the way he'd handled the frightened heifer. Not with force, but with a steady gentleness that earned its trust. She wondered if he was applying the same approach to her, waiting for her to stop seeing him as a threat and start seeing him as an ally. The thought was both comforting and unsettling. The emotional breakthrough came on a morning when autumn had begun to paint the hillsides gold and crimson. Sarah was making her weekly visit to Thomas's grave. I married him, Thomas, she whispered to the simple wooden cross. The man I told you about. I think, I think you'd like him. He's good to me. He saved the ranch. The wind stirred the grass, and she imagined she could hear forgiveness in its whisper. She remembered something Thomas had said during his final illness. "Promise me you won't spend your life mourning, Sarah. Promise me you'll find a way to be happy again." Mrs. Wade. Sarah turned to find Jonathan standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude." "It's all right. I was just visiting." His gaze moved to the weathered cross. "The cross is fading. Would you like me to make a proper headstone? Something more permanent?" The offer touched something deep inside her. "He made that cross himself," she said quietly. "He wanted to be buried on the land we were building together." "Then we'll preserve it," Jonathan said. "Incorporate it into the new headstone." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to her eyes. She turned away, but his hand came to rest gently on her shoulder. "Sarah," his voice was soft, "you don't have to apologize for loving him. I understand that he'll always be a part of who you are." She turned to face him. "How can you be so understanding? Most men would be jealous. Because I hope that someday, if something happens to me, you'll remember me with the same devotion. Love like that. It's rare. It should be honored." The words hung in the air, and Sarah felt something fundamental shift inside her. This man, this stranger, was offering her permission to grieve while still moving forward. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "What did you expect?" "Someone more calculating, someone who saw me as property he'd purchased." Jonathan laughed. "Doesn't it bother you that I married you for your money? Doesn't it bother you that I married you for companionship?" They looked at each other, and Sarah found herself smiling. "I suppose we're both guilty of practical motivations." "Practical motivations can lead to good things," he said. "We have mutual respect, similar values, and if I'm not mistaken, the beginning of genuine affection." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. He wasn't wrong. That afternoon, while Jonathan was in town, Sarah found herself drawn to his room. On the bedside table was his leather journal. She shouldn't look, but her hand moved of its own accord. She opened it to a random page. Day 12. Sarah visited Thomas's grave again. "I find myself admiring her loyalty, even as I wish some small portion of it might eventually extend to me. She's stronger than she knows. I see her watching me sometimes, trying to solve the puzzle of who I am. If only I could tell her the whole truth." Sarah closed the journal, her heart racing. He was thinking about her, hoping for more between them. When he returned, she found herself studying his face differently. "Jonathan," she said over dinner, "what is it you're not telling me?" He looked up sharply. "About your past," she pressed. "About why you're really here. There are pieces missing." He set down his fork, his expression guarded. "You're right. There are things I haven't told you. I'm not ready to share them yet. But I will say this. Nothing in my past poses any danger to you or this ranch. That's a promise." She wanted to demand the whole truth, but something in his eyes stopped her. "All right," she said finally. "But when you are ready, I'll be here to listen." The gratitude in his expression was unmistakable. "Thank you, Sarah. That means more to me than you know." Later that night, Sarah found herself thinking about trust. It came in different forms. What she was feeling for Jonathan was the gradual kind, built on small kindnesses and daily reliability. It wasn't what she'd had with Thomas, but perhaps that was as it should be. The thought no longer frightened her. In fact, it almost felt like hope. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in late October. The writer who delivered it looked like he'd traveled hard. Jonathan took one look at the sealed envelope, and his face went carefully blank. "I need to read this privately," he said. An hour passed before he emerged from his room. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like resignation. "Sarah," he called from the porch, "we need to talk." Her hands stilled on the laundry she was hanging. Those words never preceded good news. "I have to leave for Denver tomorrow," he said, his voice flat. "For how long?" "I don't know. Possibly for good." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What's happened?" "Complications with my business," he said, the letter lying on the table between them. "Legal complications. I may need to liquidate assets, settle debts, possibly face charges." "What kind of charges?" He was quiet for a long time. fraud, embezzlement, activities that allegedly took place before I came here. She stared at him, trying to reconcile this with the man she'd come to know. Tell me what really happened. His laugh was bitter. What makes you think I'd tell you the truth now? Because I'm your wife, she said firmly. Because I deserve to know. He began to pace. I wasn't entirely honest about my background. Yes, I own ranches and mines, but I acquired them through unconventional means. I worked for men who needed problems solved quietly. I recovered what was stolen. I made sure cheaters faced consequences. A chill crept up her spine. What kind of work? I suppose you could call me a hired gun, he said, finally meeting her eyes, though I preferred to think of myself as someone who leveled the playing field. The confession hung in the air. The man she'd married was a vigilante, operating outside the law. You killed people, she said. It wasn't a question. Sometimes, when there was no other way. His voice was matter of fact, but she could see the weight of those decisions in his eyes. I never killed anyone who didn't deserve it, Sarah, but there was blood on my hands when I came here. Her mind reeled. And now someone's coming after you. The letter is from my former employer, Marcus Beaumont. He's been arrested. He's trying to reduce his sentence by providing information about his associates, including me. What will you do? I'll go to Denver and try to contain the damage. But Sarah, you need to understand. If I can't resolve this, I'll have to disappear permanently. I won't bring federal marshals to your door. And what about me? Our marriage? You'd be free to divorce me. The ranch is in your name now. You'd be financially secure. The practical arrangements, laid out so calmly while her world collapsed. She wanted to scream. Instead, she asked the one question that mattered most. Did you ever care about me at all? Or was I just a convenient place to hide? The pain that flashed across his face was answer enough. I came here to disappear. That's true. I'd heard about the widow who needed help, and it seemed like perfect cover. He took a breath. But I didn't expect you. I didn't expect to find someone worth staying for. I didn't expect to fall in love. The words should have brought joy. Instead, they felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Love built on lies isn't love at all, Jonathan. No, he agreed quietly. I suppose it isn't. They sat in silence as the light faded. Two people who'd found something precious, only to discover it was built on sand. Jonathan left before dawn. Sarah watched from the window as he rode hard toward the eastern horizon. She had barely slept, tormented by the revelation of who her husband really was. The hired gun or the patient rancher? Perhaps they both were. He had appeared at the kitchen door, his face composed. I wanted to say goodbye properly. How long will you be gone? I don't know. If things go well, a few weeks. If they don't, he shrugged. And if they don't, what happens to me? You'll be fine, Sarah. Better than fine. There's money in the Denver bank. The account information is in my desk, along with papers that transfer everything to you. She had wanted to be angry, to rage against his deception. Instead, she found herself memorizing his face. Jonathan, she'd said quietly, what you told me yesterday about falling in love. Was any of that true? His mask slipped. Every word, whatever else I've lied about, that was real. Before she could respond, he was gone. Sarah stood at the window until he disappeared. Then she sat at the kitchen table and cried. For the man she was losing, for the trust that was broken, for the uncertain future that stretched ahead like an unmarked trail. The days that followed were hollow. She maintained the ranch routines, but her heart wasn't in it. The townspeople noticed his absence. Mrs. Henderson from the hotel visited, fishing for information. Business in Denver, I hear. Must be important. Yes, Sarah had replied noncommittal. After Mrs. Henderson left, Sarah found herself drawn to Jonathan's room. His leather journal was gone, but in his desk drawer she found the bank documents, property transfers, and a sealed letter addressed to her. Her hands trembled as she opened it. My dear Sarah, if you are reading this, then I have not returned. I pray you can forgive my deceptions. I came to your ranch as a man running from his past, seeking a place to hide. I leave it as a man who has learned what it means to have something worth fighting for. You taught me that. The money I've left will ensure you never face desperation again. You have the courage to build whatever life you choose. If circumstances had been different, if I had been a better man, I would have stayed and spent my life trying to earn the love I saw beginning to grow between us. All my love, always, Jonathan. 3 weeks passed with no word. Sarah threw herself into the work, preparing for winter. She hired help, using his money without guilt. Late at night, she'd find herself listening for hoofbeats, hoping against reason. When they finally came, it wasn't Jonathan. It was three men in dark coats, their movements calculated to project menace. Sarah grabbed the shotgun. The leader stepped onto her porch. "Mrs. Wade, we'd like a word." She opened the door, the shotgun visible. "I'm listening." "Name's Marcus Beaumont. I believe Jonathan mentioned me." "The man from the letter. He was supposed to be in federal custody." "You're supposed to be under arrest." He laughed. "Charges were dropped. Amazing how things work out when you have good lawyers. Your husband took something of mine when he disappeared. I'm here to collect it." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Documents," he said. "Documents that detail certain business arrangements. I have reason to believe he hid them here." "You're wrong." "I'm afraid I'll have to verify that for myself." He nodded to his men. One headed for the barn, the other for the house. Sarah raised the shotgun, but Beaumont grabbed the barrel. "No need for violence. We're just going to conduct a search." "Get off my property." "I'm afraid I can't. You see, I have every legal right to be here." He produced a foreclosure notice. "Turns out your husband's debts weren't quite as settled as you thought. The bank is seizing the property, and I've purchased the debt." The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. "You have 24 hours to vacate," Beaumont said, "unless you'd like to help us find those documents. If you do, I might let you stay on as a caretaker." "Even if I knew where they were," she said coldly, "I wouldn't tell you." "Unfortunate for you." She watched helplessly as they ransacked her home. They were thorough, destructive. "Mr. Beaumont," one of them called from upstairs, "you need to see this." In Jonathan's room, the man was holding a leather portfolio. "Hidden compartment in the desk." Beaumont opened it, his eyes lighting up. "Well, well, evidence of every illegal transaction I've made in 5 years. Your husband was planning to blackmail me, Mrs. Wade." Insurance. The revelation hit her like another betrayal. "This changes things," Beaumont said, tucking the portfolio into his coat. "I no longer need the fiction of the foreclosure." He produced another document. "A deed transfer. Congratulations, Mrs. Wade. You're still the owner of this ranch." He left her standing in her ransacked house. The truth was worse than she'd imagined. Jonathan was a blackmailer, a criminal. Yet something nagged at her. The hidden compartment, the documents. It all seemed too convenient, too easily found. Unless he'd wanted it to be found. Unless it was a different kind of insurance than Beaumont realized. 2 days later, a federal marshal rode up. "Mrs. Wade, I have some difficult news. Jonathan Wade was found dead in his cell 3 days ago. Apparent suicide." The shotgun slipped from her numb fingers. "Dead." "He left this for you," the marshal said, handing her an envelope. "Ma'am," he continued, "there were some unusual circumstances. He managed to get word to us about Beaumont's visit here. Told us Beaumont had fake foreclosure papers and was planning to search your property." Sarah looked up sharply. "Jonathan knew?" "Yes, ma'am. He also provided us with detailed information about Beaumont's criminal enterprises." "Mrs. Wade, did your husband ever mention working with federal authorities?" The revelation hit her like lightning. Jonathan hadn't been a criminal. He'd been an informant. "Those documents Beaumont found," she began, "were part of an elaborate setup," the marshal finished. "The portfolio contained enough genuine information to convince Beaumont it was valuable, but it also contained evidence that would lead us directly to his other associates. Your husband spent his last weeks making sure we had everything we needed to dismantle Beaumont's entire operation. Then why is he dead? If he was working with you, why didn't you protect him?" "We tried, ma'am, but Beaumont has friends in high places, people who can arrange things, even inside a federal facility." "You're saying he was murdered?" "I'm saying the official cause of death was suicide, and we have no evidence to suggest otherwise. The careful wording told her everything. With trembling fingers, she opened Jonathan's letter. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, then my work is finished. I know you must hate me for the deceptions. I came to Sweet Creek as an agent of the federal government, tasked with bringing down Beaumont. Your situation seemed like perfect cover. What I didn't expect was to fall in love with you. I couldn't abandon my mission, but I knew Beaumont would never stop hunting me. The only way to ensure your safety was to remove myself from the equation. The ranch is yours. Don't mourn for me. Live fully. All my love, always, Jonathan. Tears blurred her vision. The man she thought was a criminal had sacrificed himself for justice, and for her. The marshal interrupted her grief. One more thing. He asked me to give you this. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside, on blue velvet, was a delicate diamond ring. He said to tell you it was the ring he would have given you if he'd had the luxury of time and honesty. He said every moment with you was worth a lifetime of loneliness. Sarah lifted the ring, seeing through her tears how perfectly it would fit beside Thomas's simple gold band. Two rings, two loves, both lost. As the marshal rode away, Sarah realized Jonathan's greatest gift hadn't been the money. It had been showing her she was strong enough to love again, brave enough to trust again, resilient enough to build a future from the ashes of loss. 3 months later, cleaning the barn, her shovel struck a metal strongbox. The key was taped to the underside of Thomas's wooden cross. Jonathan had known she'd find it. Inside were not government documents, but personal papers. A birth certificate for Jonathan Thomas Wade. A marriage certificate from 1867, uniting him with Elizabeth Sarah Morrison, and a death certificate for Elizabeth, who died in childbirth. Elizabeth Sarah, her own name. Beneath the papers was a photograph, a wedding portrait, and the woman looked almost exactly like her. The final letter explained everything. I came because I learned a woman named Sarah was in trouble. I saw a chance at redemption. I failed my Elizabeth. I was away when she died. I thought I could do for you what I couldn't do for her. But from the moment I saw you, I knew it wasn't about redemption. You weren't Elizabeth. You were Sarah. And I fell in love with you. The resemblance is real, but it's not why I stayed. I stayed because you showed me kindness. You are your own woman, Sarah. Strong, brave, and beautiful. Live fully. Love again. 1 year to the day after Jonathan had first arrived, a woman appeared on her porch. She was tall, elegant, with Jonathan's eyes. Mrs. Wade, my name is Catherine Morrison. I believe you knew my brother, Jonathan's sister. Over coffee, the final pieces fell into place. Elizabeth was my dearest friend, Catherine said. When she died, I lost them both. Him to guilt and the dangerous life he chose. Did he love you? Truly? Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. And I loved him. Catherine smiled through her tears. I brought you something. She handed Sarah a leather-bound sketchbook. It was filled with Jonathan's precise drawings. The first pages were of Elizabeth. Then they changed. They became sketches of Sarah, hanging laundry, cooking dinner, sitting on the porch. The final drawing was of them together at the kitchen table, her hand on his. 5 years later, Sarah stood on the hill between two headstones, one for Thomas, one for Jonathan. The ranch had prospered. It was more than a business. It had become a sanctuary for people who needed a second chance. Her foreman, Jake, a good quiet man, approached her. Sarah, he said, using her first name for the first time, I was wondering if you might consider having dinner with me. Not business, just dinner. She looked at his hopeful face and thought of Jonathan's last words. Live fully, love again. All right, Jake, she said, surprising them both. Dinner. It wasn't the ending she'd once imagined for her story, but it was a new beginning. As she walked back to the house, she knew that the best stories never really end. They just begin again, chapter by chapter, with each choice to keep living, keep loving, and keep believing in the possibility of joy. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe.